back to another episode of Under Contract. You guys, I'm always excited when I get on here and interview entrepreneurs, individuals who are making a difference in the world, hustlers, movers and grinders, shakers. I mean, however you want to put it in a classification. Today, I've got something that's super, super educational and has been a game changer in my life in terms of the quality of air that I breathe, in terms of being aware of mycotoxins that might be in your food, in your environment, or just anywhere for that matter. And for those of you who aren't aware what that is, think mold, right? Anything with indoor air quality or mold or anything like that. Today, I have Michael Rubino on, and I have to say I'm super excited because not only is a renowned indoor air quality specialist, but he does so much more than that. And I can't wait to share some of what he's all about, what prompted him to start his journey, because he interviewed me 3 years ago on his podcast when I had just had my breast implants removed and was sharing with him my journey, my story, because there was mold in my implants. But it's not about me today, guys. It's about my guest. So welcome, Michael. I'm so excited to see you again.
I know. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I have been following you for years, ever since we initially had that first podcast and you interviewed me. And I have to say, that podcast, since you have reshared it over and over again, and it's featured, I believe, on your YouTube channel, so many women have reached out to me because of that podcast. The information that they've shared with me, was of courage, because they wouldn't be able to ask me questions had I not shared that, had I not done that interview. So thank you for that. But since then, you've been doing so much in terms of air quality, not just indoor air quality, but for human beings, the best health that they could live, animals, our pets, right? So tell me a little bit about, why did you go down this path of air quality?
I think I went down this path because I saw it firsthand after Hurricane Sandy hit the Northeast. I'm originally from New York, New Jersey area, and when that hurricane hit, and obviously it ruined many homes, I started seeing a pattern of people getting sick. And for me, I was 20 something at the time. It was really a remarkable thing that I never drew a conclusion to, which is that the air we breathe and the homes that we live in could actually impact our health both positively and negatively, right? And so in this case, you had a massive water intrusion event that decimated a lot of homes. It was impacting people negatively. And as I started to kind of dive into the science behind all of this stuff, looking at the EPA and everything they're putting out, I mean, just one statistic from them, every single home they're estimating could be as much as 5 or 10 times worse indoor air quality than the air quality you breathe outside. And we already know, depending on where you live, sometimes the outdoor air quality isn't so good, right? And so you start to look at that. You start to look at the rise of autoimmune disease and just chronic illness in general. You start to question, what is this? How does this play a role into it? And based upon a lot of the research I've done and all the medical journals that I've read, it actually plays a massive role in our health and well-being. And there's not a lot of people talking about that. And so, really, as I've come into this, watching remarkable transformations, not only, you've seen it firsthand, of course, I've seen thousands of people really have the most remarkable transformations. That the affirmation that I have as I sit here today is that this is really important. And, if we're not aware of these things, then we become the adverse effect of it. And so I hope that people watching this today, they learn something and get, they're in control of the quality of air they're breathing.
Yeah, and that's a large part of why I do what I do, and it probably is why you do what you do as well. I mean, we want to educate those, right? Not simply about, because let's talk about this. It's just about what I've gone through. I'm hoping is going to help you with what you're going through. Now, did you experience something in your health to make you say, "Hey, there's a connection here between how I'm feeling, my health issues, and the quality of air that I'm breathing," at that moment or shortly thereafter?
I mean, I'm always experiencing something with my health, and I think, a large portion of that is equated to me going into all these homes and buildings over the course of years. I mean, unfortunately, nothing is foolproof.
Yeah.
Even the masks that I wear, they're, if they get 95% of what I'm breathing in, that's probably as best as I could expect. And so I'm always exposing myself to something. I also want to live a normal life and want to be able to go into the grocery store or go to a restaurant and, not have to worry about what I'm being exposed to so that I'm not, constantly running out of places. I think, it comes down to this perspective of what can we control.
Right.
The health issues that I have been experiencing, I would say a lot of it is attributed to uncontrollable weight gain, regardless of what I eat. I'm on a strict detox protocol as I sit here in front of you today. I grew up as a kid with asthma. I lived in a moldy building in Staten Island. For those that don't know, mold contributes to, I believe, 21% of asthma cases, of all asthma cases. So it's a pretty large contributor. Once I moved from New York to New Jersey at about 8 years old, I completely kicked the inhaler, no longer had asthma, like a remarkable, like literally within weeks of moving into our new home. So, when I look back at all these things, like how did that trauma affect me as from a kid? How does that trauma affect me moving forward as an adult? We all know that our cells have, we all know muscle memory, we all know cell memory, things of that nature. I believe that that trauma kind of follows through with us, and I believe that's how some people that I speak to, they'll tell me, "Oh yeah, I lived in a moldy building as a kid and I got really sick, but then I was fine and for 20, 30 years I was fine, and now all of a sudden I'm back in this situation where I think I was exposed to some mold and all of a sudden I'm knocked out." And so as I start to piece all of this together, it's really, really interesting. And I mean, I think a lot of people know that mold affects your health, but I think also it's really such a new science. Honestly, it's something we've been studying over the last couple of decades, and I think there's still a lot more to learn.
So you brought up a few things in that last statement that kind of resonated with me in terms of symptoms when it comes to mold. I know personally, selling real estate for a career, I'll walk into properties and I'll know immediately. Right, there's mold in this house, not just because I see water stains or what used to be water moisture or some dampness going on, but I can smell the mustiness, even if there are hardwood floors because they probably removed the carpet because of the water damage. But when I walk into a home, whether it's a listing or my girlfriend's house or a friend's house, and I start to get watery eyes, runny nose, itchy skin, I get a headache, I immediately say, "Hey, you guys, I got to get out of here. There's mold in this house." If they're not privy to that or enlightened about that, they could and have to me say, "It's all in your head. There's no mold in my house. You're crazy. You're too sensitive." Walk me through, aside from these symptoms that I just shared that I experience, what has been common along your journey in terms of mold toxicity in individuals when either in a moldy environment or et cetera.
Yeah, so I think people actually do become hypersensitive. And, what really causes that, I couldn't tell you. I leave that up for the doctors. But there's something called mast cell activation syndrome. And when you look at mast cell activation syndrome, it's really your body becoming in this heightened state of awareness, which is what I think actually starts to happen. And that's when your white blood cells really, unfortunately, start attacking pretty much everything. It gets confused. It thinks that everything's an intruder. And with that being said, I mean, I've seen people develop sensitivities to chemicals, so fragrances and just everything out in the world that they used to never really be sensitive to, start to develop sensitivity to light, where they start to get headaches, more frequently, especially when there's a high frequency of light, and just in general, they actually are almost like a canary in the coal mine. They can
Yeah,
walk into a building and just know right away that there's mold there. I mean, they can
yeah,
sense it, right? And so, um, there's this really interesting video I saw on YouTube recently, which is it just shows you it's like really zoomed in on a colony of mold, and it shows you spores just continuously spewing out, almost like a volcano. And there actually is, you could perceive something so small, right?
mm,
There's
mm,
scientifically, and I think that when someone has this heightened sense of perception, they really just are perceiving what's going on around them much more rapidly than the average person. To give someone like an understanding of that, if you've ever been inside of a place for a long period of time, when you first walk into the place, you notice an odd smell, but as you spend a few minutes there, it just starts that smell becomes normal to you. And you don't actually notice that smell again unless you leave the house for some period of time and then
yeah,
come back, right?
yeah.
And so I can't tell you how many clients that I've had that have been like, just if you go away for the weekend and come back and your house still smells, trust me, your house is a problem. We'll be able to figure it out. Now, going back to that demonstration, I think when someone else has this heightened percent sense of perception, they're able to walk in, they're able to notice that smell almost immediately, right? And their fight or flight response starts to
Mhm,
kick in.
mhm.
And there's probably a lot at play here, but I think that there is a trauma that happens with getting sick from mold, that kicks into that flight or flight response mechanism, and it just makes you want to go, I need to get the heck out of here, right?
Yeah.
And that's what really I think what happens. And so it's really interesting. That's where kind of science meets mental health meets a legit physiological response. But I'll tell you firsthand, you're not crazy.
Right.
I've seen this happen in thousands of cases. And I think that's where it comes down to when people say, "Oh, I think that's all in your head." They just don't understand, right? They haven't been through it themselves. They haven't talked to enough people. They haven't seen this pattern develop. And when you do, when you talk to doctors, when you talk to people as much as I have, you really start to understand this is by no means a figment of anyone's imagination. This is a real physiological reaction.
And it's interesting because, again, I'm going to deflect back on my journey when I had the implants removed and there was black mold in one of the implants. Shortly thereafter, my naturopath tested me for mycotoxins, and of course, it was high. So we did a detox protocol for 3 years because there was heavy metals, there was mycotoxins, there were all sorts of things going on. But the symptoms that I displayed were not just the obvious, itchy nose. My skin was always in an eczematous state. I was always having brain fog, autoimmune issues. So all of these things that you shared are very real, and it's all a part of our environments, but it happened to be inside my body at that point. So speaking of environments, what are some things the consumer should look for when it comes to, I mean, we know you see a wet spot on the ceiling, okay, there's water. What should they look for? How can they test their home or their apartment or their living, environment for mold? I know there's some testing out there. I know you've got some other companies that you've spearheaded. Walk us through that.
Yeah, so it's actually really interesting you bring this up because I just had a conversation with a dear friend. It was a like brand new remodel, right? So the house
Ugh.
looked immaculate. And they go into the garage, and in the garage are some mechanical systems, and they're sending me pictures. And it was like if Jerry Rig had Jerry rigged this thing. Okay. It was like beyond Jerry rig. It was like seven different kinds of pipes molded together. And this is like their HVAC system, right? And
Oh
so
my.
I'm like, okay, I would bet that there are probably some carbon monoxide issues because there's no
Mhm.
way those combustion pipes are properly terminated. I would bet the HVAC system's probably from 1986 and it's probably on its last leg, and I bet you that system hasn't been cleaned since then, and all these things, right? And so I think people spend so much time trying to make the place look pretty, but neglecting the fact that look, I like pretty too, but
Mhm.
I really care about how healthy a place is. And
Mhm.
so the mechanical system is typically not something that people know that should have a value to the house. Like we all know, okay, if it's old, it might break down and there's a value to that aspect. But no, no, no. I don't even care about that aspect. I would care about, okay, has this HVAC system been maintained well? Has it
Mm.
had good filters installed on it? How clean is it? Is this ridden with bacteria and mold? Is this going to be something that's going to literally spread particles and toxins across the house that I'm going to breathe in 20,000 times a day and I'm going to get sick? Because if that's the case, I want nothing to do with this place, right? And
Yeah.
so I think these are we have to kind of almost reframe the way we think about it. Like, look, I love brand new bathrooms and kitchens like anybody else. I love beautiful designs and neutral paint colors, and I love all of it.
Yeah.
But what I love more than that is actually how someone actually addresses water damage situations in the home and how
Yeah.
they actually maintain the mechanical systems and how healthy the quality of air is inside the house. Because I think we all know that, yeah, kitchens and bathroom renovations, they can be expensive, but so can remediation. And part of the there's a lot of challenges in trying to actually understand if our home's healthy and then how do we actually create a healthy home. And
Yeah.
that's why I've started nonprofits, started for-profit companies have different products that I've helped develop, is because I'm trying to solve this overarching problem. And the overarching problem is this: how do I know if this home that I'm about to buy, that I'm
Mm.
about to rent, is healthy? That's problem number one. And for far too long, literally 30 years, people have just come in. They've called themselves experts, indoor air quality experts. They come in, they take an air sample in the center of the room, the center of the house, and they use that as a metric to say if the house is healthy or not. And you know how they do that? Well, they say, well, ma'am or sir, I see some aspergillus here in your house, but guess what? It's about the same level as outside, so we're in good shape here. Well, maybe necessarily we're not in good shape, because why is the center of the room the exact same as outside? Should be
Right.
less than
Right.
outside. Number one. Number two, the center of the room is typically furthest away from a problem area. So a problem area is typically going to be on an interior wall with a plumbing fixture, or it's
Right.
going to be on an exterior wall where you have things like water coming in from outside, a leaking window, or maybe even a roof leak, right? And so,
Or a bathroom that doesn't have a window or an exhaust.
or a bathroom that doesn't have a window or an exhaust. And so, when we test in the center of the rooms or in the center of the house, we're testing far away from where the problems might be. To give you an example of this, you'd have to have a pretty significant issue that would pervade enough air for something so light. We have to remember how light mold actually is and how small it actually is, 25 to 50 times smaller than what the eye can see, to pervade through the room, to pervade through the entire room, to get to the center of the room, to pick up enough spores in that little cassette so that when the lab technician's analyzing this sample, they raise the alarm that, hey, there's a problem here. And the conditions are usually never like just like that. And
Right.
so you end up missing things.
Right.
And so we have to solve for that problem. So I said, listen, you know what the best way to solve for this problem is? Let's stop testing the air. Let's start testing the dust. Now, why that
Mm.
might that be? Because although mold's really light, and although it might not travel that far, I mean, we all, just to go back to COVID era, we all learned something during COVID. Hey, we should be about 6 feet apart from one another. Why is that? Because viruses also very small, very light. They don't travel very far. As a matter of fact, we also learned from COVID, the virus particles, just like mold particles, they're going to attach to actually dust already in the air. And that's how they actually travel much further, stay alive much longer. And so, from that perspective, we have to understand what we want to do is we want to actually test within that 6 feet. We want to test as close to the problem that we possibly can. But here's another thing that we started to realize, and why I helped develop this test, is because when these particles attach to the dust that's already in the air, that dust, what happens to dust? Well, it eventually migrates onto surfaces. It eventually migrates onto the floor. Well, if we can collect that dust, then we can analyze what's in that dust, and then
Mm.
we could see what's abnormal or not. And through that development, I really helped. We sold thousands of tests already, and helped thousands of people understand what they're being exposed to. And for the first time, they can do that for just a couple $100, as opposed to spending thousands of dollars to take a few air samples in the center of the house to basically tell you no information.
Right. So I just love everything about this because it's all about being preventative, right? And you made a couple of points regarding a home and the condition of the HVAC system. It is so important for people, and please add to this. When you do have an HVAC system, not only is it important to maintain it and clean it, but the air filters. Some people I know of have not changed their air filters in 3 years. 3 years, and you're breathing in that, and when they do change the filter, looking at the filter is enough to make me go and get hives, right? Those are common areas in a home, but let's talk a little bit about moisture-induced mold. For example, in your, washer, dishwashers, your clothing washer, the tub, the drum of the washer. I've noticed in some properties when I'm doing an inspection, there is mold in the tub, like the rubber tub or basin of. Walk us through that. How can we prevent it of that? Because it's entirely impossible. I know I'm hyper vigilant about it in my home, but how can you avoid mold there? Because you literally have to clean it out every day, air it out every day.
Yeah, I mean, that is the trick, right? So when we're talking about like our appliances, one of the biggest problems with certain appliances, especially I would say if you have like a front loading washing machine, I know they look amazing. I can tell you I have a top loading one for a reason. And the reason is because anything that has a rubber gasket, which is pretty much any apparatus that uses water, that what it does is it stops and starts the flow of water, right? And so
Mm,
if you have a front loading washing machine, for example, you have a rubber gasket. If you've ever
mhm,
opened that door and you paid attention to the threshold, you know what I'm talking about. That rubber gasket literally stops water from coming out all over onto your floor as the cycle runs, right? And so obviously very important piece of the machinery. However, it also does one really stupid thing, but unfortunately there's really no way around it, and it traps moisture. And
mm.
so if you have a front loading washing machine and you ever notice that it smells like mold, it's because there's mold there. What I want you to do is I want you to peel back that rubber gasket a little bit. Like it has flaps that kind of flaps over. Just peel it back. You'll find the mold right there. It'll be like
Oh,
Eureka. Oh my goodness. Right. And so they get really, really disgusting, unfortunately. Now, how do we prevent that? Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but you're going to want to open that door every time you're done using the laundry machine, and you're going to want to let it air out.
yeah.
You also might want to actually, once you find the mold in that fold, you'll know what I'm talking about. There is a fold. You might even want to go so far as to when you open the door and you air it out, you may actually want to wipe down inside of the fold to actually get any trapped moisture from
Mm,
staying there. Because
yeah,
here's what ends up happening. Like mold's part of our ecosystem. We can't get rid of mold entirely, nor do we want to. It does have a pretty good purpose in our world, such as destroying, eating decaying
yeah,
organic matter, right? And
yeah,
so, unless we want our lawns to pile up with leaves forever and have all this stuff that doesn't take care of itself, we need mold.
yeah.
Now, we don't want mold in our washing machine, though. There's really no reason we'd want to have it there. So
Mm-mm.
we want to actually try to do everything we possibly could to prevent it from growing in some of these apparatuses. And it really just starts with paying attention to moisture,
Yeah,
because unfortunately, you're going to bring mold home on your clothes. You're going to put in the washing machine. You're going to add water. So the spores are already there to
yeah.
continue to grow. All it needs is moisture for at least 24 to 48 hours. And you're going to find that in the fold. You know where else you'll find it in a washing machine? Those, the trays where you
Oh,
actually put all the detergents. And
yes.
plenty of opportunity to trap moisture there as well, because you're
God.
always kind of loading it in. The water mixes in there. It never really fully dries. And so that's another weak area where mold can start to grow in there. And so what do you
Wow.
need to do? Every once in a while, take that tray out, wipe it down, let it air dry, put it back in, right? And
Yeah.
so not extremely difficult. Another thing you can do is get something like there's a product called EC3 laundry additive that removes mold from clothes. You kind of like you throw it in there with your normal detergent that you like to
Mhm,
use,
mhm.
and every once in a while, just kind of deep cleansing your clothes and deep cleansing the machine along with it. Probably not a bad idea.
It's interesting because, again, this goes back to when you have a heightened sense of mold, you can smell the mustiness. I have smelled clothing that was very musty, right? And these are clothes that are being washed in fragrance-free, free and clear detergents, right? So you don't have that fragrance masking, but that is indicative of mold, if you ask me, because your clothing shouldn't be musty. Um, there's a couple of things too in terms of sources of mold. We've got the air, we've got moisture, food. Food also. Cheeses have a high concentration of mold. Again, we can't avoid all of these things, but I'm speaking from experience. When I did my detox, I had to avoid moldy food like grapes. I couldn't do cantaloupes. I couldn't do cheeses. There were so many things that I could not do because my mycotoxin levels were so high that I literally had to scale back and remove all of that. So the consumer isn't aware of these little details because unless you've gone through it, you're not privy to it. You wouldn't know to say, I don't want those grapes because they're high in mold, or I can't have that cheese because it's high in mold. So food, the environment, our indoor air quality. Tell me a little bit about I saw a YouTube this morning about the dust particles and your pets. Tell us a little bit about that because I have dogs, and when I saw this video, of course, I'm that person gets up immediately and I wrote it down because I'm going to order the test because I probably have mold because of the dust and the dogs and the whole 9 yards. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so, it's creating a healthy environment isn't just important for you and I. It's important for our pets too.
Yeah.
Think about if you have a cat, you have a dog. It's very low to the ground, right? We're a few feet above the ground. Dogs are maybe what, less than a foot above the ground. Cats are less than a foot above the ground. And if you think about where everything collects, again, going back to that picture of like a volcano, right? You have things like mold or bacteria inside your house, which by the way, you will have some level of mold and bacteria in your house. It's constantly reproducing like a volcano would, and you're getting these little spores that are kind of spewing out. You're getting potential toxins that could be spewing out depending on if mold or bacteria feels threatened. Wow, what
Mhm.
makes them feel threatened? Usually by other molds and other bacteria, trying to fight
Mm.
for the same real estate. So when you have all these things being created, they aerosolize, right? They hitch a ride on the dust that's already in the air. Now, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, go sit near a window on a sunny day sometime, watch that ray of light refract off the dust, and it'll blow your mind how much dust is already in the air. These
Gosh.
particles attach to the dust that's already in the air. And then what do? They fall, they settle, they become part of, your furniture, they become
Yeah.
part of your floor. And when you think about cats and dogs, what are they doing? They're literally breathing so close to the floor, so close to the couch, so close to the furniture that they're going to be so much more exposed to whatever is going on in your home than you even would, right? And
Yeah.
so when you think about it from that perspective and how many breaths your dog or your cat or your furry loved one's taking every single day, whatever they're being exposed to, you're being exposed to as well. But again, that heightened exposure with how the close proximity to where the dust collects, I think is really important. And so when you test your dust, you're understanding what you're exposed to, but you're also understanding what your pets are exposed to. And I think, look, our pets become part of our family. They
Mhm.
are our family, right? And
Mhm.
so I think it's really important that we're thinking about everything around creating a healthy environment and why that's so important.
Yeah. It's so true because if you think about where your pet walks, especially outside, right? And the water, and you don't know what's in there, and they bring it in, they're tracking it, and the floors are dirty and they're dusty, and all sorts of things are happening. It's not just about you as the person who's taking care of these pets. It's about the quality of your air. It's about the food you're consuming. It's about preventative measures within that house, whether you're renting or if you own, and it's your pets. It's a lifestyle, period, right? Um, Tell us a little bit about where I want to hear a little bit more about your nonprofit and these other products and these other companies you've started and where the consumer can go to purchase this test kit because I think it's very important to share that with my audience and with those listening because it's a very important thing to do for you for your health and for your life.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, look, the dust test, it's called the dust test. You go to thedusttest.com. Very simple. When you buy it today, it comes in a couple days. You collect dust, you send it back. Takes a couple days to ship it, to the lab, a couple days for the lab to analyze it. I'd say you buy it today, within 2 weeks, you should have some answers as to what's going on in your house. It's really simple. It comes with instructions, videos, very easy to use. As someone who really might never have tested their dust before, understand what that process is like. It's very simple. And that really is the first step into understanding, does my home even have a problem? And
Yeah.
so if you're listening to this and you think that your house might have some issues, this is where you start.
Yeah.
And I created this product just for that in mind because it could be so confusing talking to different experts. There's all different camps of beliefs of what people believe to be the problem and what not to be the problem. I tell you, just scientifically starting there will give you some answers. You could
Mhm.
take those answers to the next step if need be, or
Yeah.
get you the peace of mind that your house is in good shape. There's really not much issue there. Um, from there, it's like, well, I thought of what other solutions might people need if they're trying to create a healthy environment. And so HomeCleanse is a company that I created 7 years ago now. And the goal of that company is to scientifically improve the quality of air people are breathing by fixing problems, inside the home. And so that might be, renovating a bathroom because the bathroom's been leaking for years. That might be, cleaning the HVAC system because the HVAC system's atrocious and it's affecting the air quality. Whatever that might look like, it's all dependent upon the unique problems that your home specifically has. And that's kind of how that company works. From there, I realized pretty early on in my career that I can't fix this one house at a time.
Mhm.
And so the goal was, we need a foundation that's helping to push civilization forward. Now, why is that? Because you'd be surprised to know that if you go on any US Department of Health website,
Mm,
and for those that don't know how this works, you have different state websites, then you also have the federal websites, right? And so when you look at each state websites and the federal website, none of them are on the same page. You know, one website will tell you to use bleach, the EPA will tell you
ugh,
don't use bleach, please don't use bleach, right? And so you have conflicting information. Why is that? Because the websites haven't been updated since like 1996, okay? And
wow.
so a lot has changed since 1996. And we wanted to create a foundation that can literally help push these industries forward. And so we've got, research projects out there that we funded. We have tons of education. We've partnered with the IICRC, and we're helping to actually lobby for laws to be updated and modernized, because again, a lot of the laws on indoor air quality and mold and all these things, they're very antiquated. And so they
Yeah.
need to be modernized so that people have a fighting chance and have good air quality. Because I think clean air and clean water, these are two things that should be basic human rights. We shouldn't even have to think twice about it. And unfortunately, the way our systems are set up, it's not really accurate, right? And so, give you an example, I could have a water leak. As a matter of fact, I had a water leak a couple months ago. Call my insurance company. Insurance company says, "Listen, unless a
Mm,
hole ripped through your house
right.
and then it rained into your house, you're
Right.
not covered."
Yep.
Like, I mean, I already kind of expected they weren't going to cover it, but like, I
Yeah.
just wanted to go through the process of what so
Yeah.
many people struggle to go through. Like, that is the most ridiculous thing. So, even though I know this stuff, even though I know how to do it, I still have to work with other contractors and
Mhm.
put the wall back and fix everything. It's going to cost me thousands of dollars, right? And
Yeah.
so, I think when I look at all this stuff and all the things that we're plagued with, like, we need change if we want to actually have healthy buildings. I don't need to tell you, because you could do a quick Google search. Go look at military housing, all the
Oh,
conditions they're living in, mold and cockroaches and termites, unbelievable. Go look at Section 8 housing, right?
yeah.
Where poverty stricken individuals live, where welfare individuals are living, and they're living there to rebound and get a second chance. Well, how good of a second chance do you think they have if they're living in moldy bacteria,
Right.
cockroach infested buildings? They're
Right.
not
Right.
given much of a second chance, right? And so as you start to piece all these things together, we need change.
Yeah.
And change isn't going to happen by me fixing one house at a time. Change is going to happen through actually pushing industries forward and
Yeah.
getting everybody aligned and on the same page. And so, if you like anything what I've said here, and or if you just need free resources yourself, please go to changetheairfoundation.org, because there's a bunch of amazing free resources, and please get involved if you want to get involved.
That's something I can wrap my head around 10 times, right? Changetheair.org, because it really is, it boils down to the system. And the system is broken. And as a result, healthcare people, I mean, we could have another podcast on all these conversations, right? But name again, .org. What's the name of it again?
Changetheairfoundation.org.
Changetheairfoundation.org. You guys get involved. Before we go, give me two things the consumer, besides what we've already talked about, the consumer can do right now that's fairly simple and not quite as expensive, in addition to what you've already suggested, to test their home for mold. I know there's little petri dishes out there that they can do. I don't know how accurate those are. But, two things they can do, or two myths that you want to debunk that the consumer doesn't know that they think they know.
I'll give you both. All right.
Okay,
So two
perfect.
things you can do. The first, I would say, let me give you three things you can do. All right.
Okay.
So, first off, we already talked about HVAC filters and how some
Yep.
people don't change them for years. Change those HVAC filters, upgrade to the highest MERV rating that you possibly can inside your home. That MERV rating is an efficiency rating. Basically, the higher the rating, the smaller the particle it can remove at a
Mm,
higher efficiency. And so, mold is very small, bacteria is very small. You want to try to capture those particles and not have them, contaminate your HVAC system and distribute across your house. So I would say that is something that you want to be mindful of, be on top of, and get the best filter you can. Not the cheapest filter. Get the best filter. Believe me, it's an investment in your health. The
right.
second thing I want you to do is I want you to have a cleaning routine to remove dust in your house. And
Mm.
the reason I want you to do that is because when you let dust accumulate, it's not just dead hair and skin cells. Unfortunately, it's animal proteins, it's pet dander, it's bacteria, it's mold, it's viruses, it's formaldehyde, it's VOCs, it's all these different things that our body has to fight to remove. And so
Mm.
the more you maintain a dust free home, and dust free is impossible. So, it only is dust free if you're actually maintaining it that way. The more you strive for that, the better you're going to be, because you're going to be breathing cleaner, healthier air. The third thing that you can do, very simple, it's going to help you with that last thing I just mentioned. Get some air purifiers. Doesn't have to be
Yes.
the most expensive ones. Just get some. I know good air purifiers you could go on homecleanse.com right now and find for like $150. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to cost you an arm and a leg.
Yeah.
And when you get those air purifiers, you're doing two things. One, you're obviously continuously taking air like a vacuum, running it through, and it has a filter. That filter's going to trap particles. So you're actually keeping up with dust, because you're going to remove a lot of that dust through the air purifier. And then you're less dusting you have to do. So it's like a 2-for-1 deal here. And then, with that and paying attention to the HVAC filter and actually keeping up with a cleaning routine, you're just going to have a lot healthier of an environment. So,
Mm.
especially if you're trying to figure out, do I have mold? Do I not have mold? Maybe you're in that limbo waiting for remediation. Do those things and it'll make a pretty big difference. I want to dispel one big myth here. I kind of already mentioned it earlier. Two big myths. How about this? So, first off, bleach does not kill mold. Using those types of products to try to kill mold, that should not be the objective. You want to remove it. Now,
Yeah.
I'm going to give you an example. You go out into your lawn right now and you have weeds. Well, if you use weed killer, what happens? The weed shrivels up and it's still there,
Yeah.
right? You have to pull the weed from the roots out of the lawn, right? If the same concept applies to mold, if you just spray mold killer on something, if it even kills it, and I don't think of many things are effective at killing it, you're still going to have the roots there. If there's moisture, it's going to come right back.
Mhm.
It's not an effective approach, right? And so
Gotcha.
that's a big myth that people need to understand. The second big myth is people think if they just solve the moisture problem, the mold just dies off and goes away. No, it goes dormant. It's not producing as much. It might not be as active, but unfortunately, it's still there. It's still creating particles, still creating toxins potentially that could be entering your body with every breath that you take 20,000 times a day. So if you have mold, you need to remove the mold and
Yep.
fix the water source so it doesn't come
Yep.
back. But
Yep.
definitely important things.
Well, I have to say, I thought I knew a lot about this subject, but clearly I learned a ton today. And I appreciate your insight. I appreciate your education. I appreciate what you're doing, the change that you're doing. You guys, if there's anything that you can do right now to get involved, go to his website, go to the foundation, get involved, do whatever you need to do, educate yourself, because the indoor air quality is so vital to your health, not just your breathing health, but your immune health, your skin health, your life, the way you think, the way you look, the way you feel. Everything is interconnected. And if that isn't dialed in, there's no way you can go out into the world and be the change that you want to be in the world. So, Michael Rubino, thank you so much. Always grateful to have you on. You guys, thank you again for tuning in. If you want any information, we'll have his information linked here on the pod. And as always, thank you for tuning in to another podcast of Under Contract. Peace out.